All right, so to start off, you're going to start with your block of clay and get a wire cutter and cut off your desired amount. And then you're going to bring it over to a nice solid flat area to wedge it on. The wedging process is just to get all of the air bubbles out, because if you have an air bubble in your piece, it's going to make centering difficult. If it stays in the piece, then it'll probably explode in the kiln. So you want to make sure all the air bubbles are out. Throw your piece of clay right down in the middle and seal it down onto your wheel. And from here, you are going to start wedging it on your wheel. And it's important to wedge it off of the wheel and on the wheel just to make sure all of the air bubbles are out. It's important for the integrity of the piece. So once you wedge it on the wheel, then you're gonna push the clay back down until it's like an igloo kind of shape. And so once it's about an igloo kind of shape, you're going to take off any excess clay on the side that is in the way, just to clean up your wheel a little bit. And from here, you're going to drill a hole in the middle to make a container. You want to make sure not to drill the hole too deep, or else you will just poke a hole through your cup or bowl, whatever you're making. So you've pushed down to drill the hole, and now you're going to pull outwards. So once you pull your clay outwards, the walls of the cup or bowl, whatever it is, are going to be very thick. So the next step would be pulling. So pulling the clay is just putting pressure on either side of the wall of the clay. So you have your fingers on one side and then the other side, and then you're just pushing them together and pulling up. And this motion makes the walls thinner and taller. So you're just going to keep repeating this and pulling until you get your desired height of your mug or cup and your desired thickness of the walls. And so once you finish pulling, then I like to do a wet trimming, and trimming is just taking off any extra clay. And so wet trimming is done on your wheel, and then there's dry trimming as well, but it's done once the piece has been removed and has had some time to dry. But for wet trimming, you would just take a sharp tool and push it against the side of your piece. And so once you're done wet trimming your piece, it's time to remove it. So you would take your wire cutter again and make sure it has nice and tight tension, and just slide that wire cutter underneath the piece and remove it from the wheel. So once you remove your piece from the wheel, you let it dry somewhere else, and you want it to be about leather hard, so a leather consistency. And once it's this consistency, then you could do several things to it. You can add a handle for a mug. Next would be to score the piece, and scoring is just adding texture to it. So once you finish wedging, throwing, and trimming, and adding on any handles you may want, then the next step would just to be to let your piece dry out completely and make sure there's no moisture. If there's any moisture in it, then once you put it in the kiln, then it'll explode from there being too much moisture in there and heating up too fast. So you let your piece dry out, and then it's ready to be put in the kiln for the first time. And this is going to be the bisque firing. So once the piece is done being bisque fired, then it turns into stoneware and it becomes really hard, and now it is ready to be glazed. And so you can paint it and glaze it however you may want. And once you're finished painting and glazing it, then it goes back into the kiln to be glaze fired. So what the glaze is just like colored sand, And so in the 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, the colored sand turns into colored glass, and that's how you get the really shiny, soft surface that you get on your mugs and bowls and vases. After a piece is glaze fired, then it is ready to be used, and it's food safe and microwavable safe after that. Someone that finds pottery frustrating, I mean, that's how it all is. When you start out with something, it's always going to be frustrating and new. So I would just say to keep being persistent, because it's going to come to you eventually. It takes a long time to get used to the process, the muscle memory of it all. So you really just have to stick with it and constantly be pushing yourself and trying new things. Just really trying to create every day. If you create something every day, then you're gonna get better. You're just gonna get better.
Is pottery fun?
Pottery is fun. It's good.